Why stress keeps your belly fat alive? Most people believe belly fat is a discipline problem. Eat less, move more, try harder. But science tells a very different story. Your body doesn't store fat randomly, and it doesn't respond to pressure the way we've been taught. In fact, the fat you struggle with the most may be responding to stress, hormones, and survival signals you don't even realize are active. In this video, we're going to uncover what visceral fat really is, why it behaves differently from the rest of your body fat, and how understanding its biology could change the way you approach health and fat loss forever. Most people believe belly fat is a calorie problem. They think if they just eat less, move more, or push themselves harder at the gym, it will eventually disappear. But what if the most dangerous fat in your body isn't responding to effort at all? What if it's responding to stress? Visceral fat, the fat that wraps itself around your organs, behaves differently from everything you've been taught. And in many cases, the harder you try to force it away, the more stubborn it becomes. In this video, we're going to uncover why stress hormones, especially cortisol, quietly control visceral fat, why intense exercise can sometimes make the problem worse, and what actually allows the body to release this hidden, high-risk fat safely and sustainably. What visceral fat really is. Visceral fat is not the same as the fat you can pinch under your skin. It lives deeper, surrounding organs like the liver, pancreas, and intestines. And unlike subcutaneous fat, visceral fat is metabolically active. That means it doesn't just sit there. It releases inflammatory compounds, interferes with insulin signaling, and directly increases the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and even certain cancers. This is why doctors worry less about how your body looks and more about where fat is stored. What makes visceral fat especially dangerous is that it listens closely to hormonal signals, not willpower. And one hormone speaks louder to it than almost any other: cortisol. Cortisol, the fat-storing stress signal. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but that label oversimplifies its role. Cortisol is actually a survival hormone. It helps regulate blood sugar, manage inflammation, and mobilize energy when the body senses threat. In short bursts, cortisol is protective. The problem begins when cortisol stays elevated for long periods, not because you're in danger, but because modern life constantly tells your nervous system that you are. Deadlines, financial pressure, emotional stress, poor sleep, constant notifications. Under recovery from exercise, all of these keep cortisol switched on. When cortisol remains high, your body shifts into conservation mode. It assumes energy is scarce and danger is ongoing. And one of the body's most reliable survival strategies is to store energy as visceral fat. Why harder workouts can backfire. This is where many people get stuck. They notice belly fat isn't going away, so they push harder. More cardio, more HIIT, fewer calories, less rest. But intense exercise is itself a stressor. When the body is already operating under chronic stress, adding frequent high-intensity workouts can elevate cortisol even further. Instead of signaling fat loss, the body hears danger. This doesn't mean exercise is bad. It means timing, intensity, and recovery matter more than most people realize. For someone already stressed, sleep-deprived, or inflamed, forcing extreme workouts can reinforce the very hormonal environment that protects visceral fat. The body isn't resisting fat loss out of stubbornness. It's responding logically to the signals it's receiving. Why visceral fat is different from normal fat. Visceral fat contains a high density of cortisol receptors. That means it responds quickly and aggressively to stress hormones. When cortisol rises, visceral fat is more likely to grow. When cortisol stays elevated, visceral fat becomes harder to access and harder to mobilize. This is why two people can eat similarly, exercise similarly, and yet store fat very differently. The difference isn't discipline, it's biology. Visceral fat acts almost like a stress buffer, a storage system designed to protect vital organs during prolonged threat. Until the body perceives safety again, it has little incentive to let that fat go. What actually signals the body to release visceral fat? The key to reducing visceral fat is not forcing fat loss, it's reducing threat signals. Low-intensity, consistent movement sends a very different message than all-out effort. Walking, gentle cycling, light resistance training, and daily movement lower cortisol while improving insulin sensitivity. Sleep plays an even bigger role. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, disrupts glucose regulation, and increases hunger hormones. Restorative sleep tells the nervous system that the environment is safe again. Nutrition also matters, not in terms of restriction, but stability. Stable blood sugar reduces cortisol spikes, balanced meals reduce metabolic stress, and perhaps most importantly, reducing psychological stress changes fat metabolism at a hormonal level. This is why people often lose visceral fat during periods of emotional relief, vacations, lifestyle changes, or reduced workload, even without dramatic changes in diet or exercise. The body releases fat when it feels safe. Why this changes how we think about fat loss. For decades, fat loss has been framed as a moral battle, discipline versus laziness. But visceral fat exposes the flaw in that narrative. This fat responds to stress, not shame, to safety, not punishment. Understanding this shifts the focus away from extremes and toward regulation. From burning calories to managing signals. The goal isn't to eliminate stress. That's unrealistic. The goal is to prevent chronic stress from becoming the body's default state. When cortisol normalizes, the body no longer needs to defend visceral fat. The nervous system, the missing piece. To truly understand why visceral fat behaves the way it does, we need to look beyond hormones alone and examine the nervous system. Your body is constantly scanning the environment for signals of safety or threat. This process happens automatically, long before conscious thought. When the nervous system perceives danger, physical, emotional, or psychological, it shifts into a defensive mode. This state is commonly known as sympathetic dominance, or fight or flight. In this mode, the body prioritizes survival over long-term health. Digestion slows, immune regulation shifts, fat storage becomes protective rather than expendable. Visceral fat thrives in this environment because it serves as an energy reserve close to vital organs. From an evolutionary perspective, this made sense. During prolonged stress or scarcity, storing energy internally increased survival odds. The problem is that modern stress rarely resolves quickly. The nervous system stays activated for weeks, months, or even years, and visceral fat adapts accordingly. Why calorie deficits don't always work. One of the most frustrating experiences people report is eating less, but not losing belly fat or even gaining it. This isn't imaginary, it's physiological. When calorie intake drops too low while stress remains high, the body interprets the situation as a compounded threat. Not only is the environment unsafe, but resources are scarce. Cortisol rises further to maintain blood glucose and energy availability. Muscle breakdown may increase, metabolism may slow. Meanwhile, visceral fat is preserved or even expanded because it is hormonally protected. This is why aggressive dieting often leads to plateaus, rebound weight gain, and increased abdominal fat over time. The body is not failing, it is adapting. Fat loss requires cooperation from the nervous system, not force against it. Insulin, blood sugar, and stress fat. Visceral fat is deeply intertwined with insulin resistance. Under chronic stress, cortisol increases glucose availability in the bloodstream. This was useful when stress meant physical danger, but in modern life, this constant glucose release overwhelms the system. Insulin becomes less effective. Cells resist glucose uptake. Blood sugar remains elevated. Visceral fat both contributes to and benefits from this state. It releases inflammatory molecules that worsen insulin resistance, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Breaking this cycle does not require extreme restriction. It requires restoring metabolic rhythm, gentle movement after meals, consistent eating patterns, adequate protein and fiber, and reduced stress exposure all help resensitize insulin signaling. When insulin improves, visceral fat loses one of its strongest protective shields. Why low-intensity movement is underrated? Modern fitness culture glorifies intensity, but biology favors frequency and safety. Low-intensity movement, walking, standing, light resistance training reduces cortisol while improving glucose uptake and circulation. Unlike high-intensity exercise, it does not activate the stress response aggressively. Instead, it signals stability. This is especially important for individuals with high baseline stress, poor sleep, or chronic inflammation. Visceral fat responds better to environments of calm consistency than bursts of exertion followed by exhaustion. This does not mean intense exercise has no place. It means it must be layered on top of a regulated system, not used as a corrective punishment. Sleep. The hormonal reset. Sleep is one of the most powerful regulators of cortisol, insulin, appetite hormones, and fat distribution. Short sleep duration and poor sleep quality elevate cortisol the following day. They also increase hunger hormones and reduce satiety signals. Even one night of poor sleep can impair insulin sensitivity by up to 20 to 30%. Visceral fat is especially sensitive to this disruption. Consistent, restorative sleep tells the nervous system that danger has passed. Cortisol patterns normalize. Fat storage becomes less necessary. For many people, improving sleep alone leads to noticeable reductions in abdominal fat without any change in calories or exercise volume.